everyone, and welcome to North Warwickshire, and welcome to Coleshill. I think there is a microphone. There we go. I'm better. So, my name's Adam Farrell. I am leader of the Labour group here in North Warwickshire, and I'm a councillor here in this town of Coleshill. And it is amazing to have so many people here today. Can you hear me without the mic? Yes. So it is amazing to have so many people here today in Coleshill to listen to Jeremy Corbyn talk about Labour's vision for Britain, but also to talk about these upcoming local elections here in North Warwickshire on May the 2nd, because these local elections will help deliver a Labour government, and if we do not have Labour councillors and Labour councils, we will not get Jeremy into Downing Street. Now, I can't believe it's been this long, but 15 years ago, I stepped foot in this school hall on my first day at secondary school here. But I was lucky because back then, in the early 2000s, this was a school being run under a Labour government. And under that Labour government, they invested in education and they gave kids like me the opportunity to go on to college and be the first member of my family to go on to university. But today, that Labour government seems like a lifetime ago, because schools like this today, under 9 years of Tory austerity, have seen cuts after cuts after cuts. And the kids that go here today face losing about £300 a pupil, £250,000 a year, because Theresa May has decided to cut our kids' education. But in North Warwickshire, it's not just schools that are facing the Tory cuts, because we are a borough that today has no police stations, that has no street lights after 12, that has 6 community police officers to cover 110 square miles. And only last month, the Tories here in Coleshill tried to cut our fire station as well. And that is the reality of the situation. And that is the reason we desperately need a Labour government, led by Jeremy Corbyn, to deliver for the people of North Warwickshire and to stop the cuts that are happening to our communities. But we don't know when that next general election will be. It could be this year, it could be in 2020. But the people of North Warwickshire cannot wait that long for Labour to be in power. And that's why this May, working together, we have an opportunity to deliver Labour in power in local government. Now, some of you will be thinking, well, that's all fine, but can we win in areas like North Warwickshire? Can Labour win outside of the big cities? And the answer is yes. Yes, we can. Because if you look at our by-election results over the last 2 or 3 years, we've seen swings in double digits. We've seen Labour gain seats from the Tories. And we, last August, took the Tory Leaders' Award to within 38 votes of becoming Labour for the first time in history. That is the difference a good campaign can make to delivering Labour councillors and a Labour council and ultimately a Labour government. Now in May we need just 5 Labour gains, a swing of 2%. Labour can win here if we organise, if we go street by street, village by village, ward by ward, talking to people about the issues that really matter. And with the campaign office opening this Tuesday, and our fantastic new local campaign organiser, Chelsea, who's at the back today, starting work today for the very first time, this is the opportunity to get involved in North Warwickshire locally and to make a difference. And if there was ever a better reason to vote Labour, it is crime and policing. And it's crime and policing because in this area we have seen crime rise and the Tories cut our police time and time again. And that's why a Labour council will invest in police. It's why we'll put a bobby back on the beat in every single village, and it's why we'll turn the street lights back on as well, and we'll pay the Tories at Shire Hall to do just that, so there can be no excuse for putting our lights back on. And I'll end with this, because people sometimes say that we're all the same, that politics doesn't matter, that leaders don't make a difference. Well, when Theresa May came to Coleshill a few years ago, and I kid you not now, she came here to celebrate the closure of Coleshill Police Station. She came here after cutting the budget of Warwickshire Police, seeing hundreds of officers leave the force, and she actually came here to have a photograph with the local Tories outside the new police desk at the library. As if a library can ever replace a police station. And today, Jeremy Corbyn is here, in stark contrast to Theresa May's visit, actually meeting real people. Not to talk about celebrating the loss of public services, but to talk about how Labour will invest in our communities, how we will invest in police, how we'll put more police officers on the beat and put tackling crime at the heart of our agenda for government. And that's the difference between Labour and the Tories. When we say we will end austerity, we actually mean it. So let's get to it and hear from the man himself, the man who is going to lead the next Labour government. Please welcome Jeremy Corbyn.
Up here, I feel like the head teacher addressing the class. We should have been down there, you know. Can I say thanks all for coming along this morning, and wonderful to see you all, and wonderful to be able to hear what's going on and what campaigning you're doing here. And I've just come from the Labour Local Government Conference at the University in Warwick, and there I was describing how the Tories have rolled out austerity and made local government the vehicles for carrying out austerity across the whole country. And that is what I want to reverse in government. But it means in advance of that, we need as many Labour councillors as we can possibly get, and as many Labour councils as we can possibly get, so they can carry that message forward and be ready for what a Labour government will do, because half of the last election manifesto will be delivered through local government. Housing, education, community care and services, as well as transport and many, many other things will be delivered largely by local government. So these council elections in May are not just an opportunity to elect Labour councillors, they're actually to prepare the ground for a Labour government that will be elected hopefully very soon. Could I say it's very nice to see Mike O'Brien here, former MP. Mike, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for all the work that you did. And Adam just talking now about the police and the role that the last Labour government played in bringing in a Safer Neighbourhoods team and community policing, bringing in policing by consent, and quite specifically and deliberately involving local government with the police so that we build communities and you have policing within communities, but you also ensure that there are facilities for young people, there are safer neighbourhoods and all that. That was a comprehensive, serious plan about reducing crime by addressing the causes of crime, and Mike was very much part of that team that delivered that. So thanks very much for the work that you did on all of that. There are so many issues today that I would like to talk about, but essentially this, that the Tories keep on attacking all of us at the moment and are in a sort of desperate fundraising drive at the present time. They charge £15,000 per head to have dinner with Theresa May the other night. Now I'll ask two questions of you. First of all, how many of you are able to pay £15,000 for dinner? I was kind of thinking that being the answer. How many would pay £15,000 not to have dinner with you have the £15,000 available. I mean, it's utterly extraordinary. She's supposed to be in Brussels negotiating with them, breaks off to say she's got to go back to London for dinner, and they probably thought, well, I think that's a bit weird. There's plenty of dinners available in Brussels. She said, no, she had to go for this dinner. And they're desperate to raise money. And apparently the strapline of their party chair was that £15,000 is cheap, because if Corbyn gets into government, you'll pay more than that in tax every year. Well, that says something. I don't know all the people were there, but I do know that a Labour government, yes, we will be increasing taxes for the richest 5%. Will we be increasing corporation taxes? Yes, we will. Why? Because I want to fund education, I want to fund health, I want to fund housing, I want to fund the needs of the poorest people in this country, not tax breaks for the very wealthiest. Let them spend their £15,000 listening to Theresa May. The reality is that the rest of the country wants something very different. That's why our priority is pushing as urgently and as hard as we can to get a general election so the people of this country... Why she's running down the deal, running down the discussion about the deal with the European Union. It's why she pulled the vote that was due on December the 11th on her deal, put it off for more than a month, and then has broken 2 historical records in British parliamentary history. You know, they're quite amazing records, and she should be, well, she'll be recorded in history for these records. One, the first ever government in the history of democratic politics in Britain to be found in contempt of Parliament by a vote of MPs, including Tory MPs, for their refusal to publish the legal advice surrounding Brexit. Quite some record. As if that wasn't enough, she didn't rest her laurels there. Oh, no. I mean, taking her deal off the table in December, because she didn't want to vote on December the 11th, having had a meeting with me a week before to agree on a parliamentary programme of a 5-day debate with a vote on at the end of it on December the 11th, broke her word on that. She then finally puts it to a vote of Parliament a month later and loses by the biggest ever defeat ever in British history of any government in office on anything. Her only protection is the Fixed Term Parliament Act. Any other government would have been out of office at that point, and we would now be in the general election campaign. Just think about that. A government that's lost its majority, lost its authority, lost its competence, and this week had so little business to do in Parliament, because they have no legislative programme. Parliament finished at 3:30 on Wednesday afternoon. I know most people like to finish early on a Friday afternoon, but to finish early on a Wednesday afternoon is taking the long weekend just a little bit too far. They have nothing to do and nothing to say in Parliament, except they're now running down the clock by threatening a no-deal leaving of the EU on the 29th of March. And whatever people voted in the referendum, nobody voted for a no-deal leaving. Nobody voted for the disaster of immediate job losses and supply chain problems in manufacturing industry all across the West Midlands and indeed all across the country. Nobody voted for that. And so I have put forward the views that was expressed at our party conference last year, which were comprehensive, and the party conference came together in the views that they put forward. Came together in the views around a customs union with the European Union, access to European trade markets, and no running down of our rights at work, our environmental protections, or our consumer rights. Don't turn this country into some kind of offshore tax haven on the shores of Europe where we deregulate our economy in order to make it attractive for dodgy investment to come in, which will then be dependent on lower wages, worse working conditions, worse consumer protections. In other words, do you want good food standards or do you want chlorinated chicken brought in from Donald Trump? I think we all know the answer to that question. And so we have to put our views forward, and we will do that again next week in Parliament, when apparently she's due to make a statement on Wednesday, with the maybe debate on Thursday, but the latest rumour is that's going to be put off for another week or another fortnight, or goodness knows when, because they don't want to suffer another defeat in Parliament. Now, people in different parts of the country voted different ways. This area voted 67% leave. The constituency I represent voted 73% remain. You could say there's a massive chasm of difference between those constituencies. Yesterday, I was doing my advice bureau in my constituency, as I do every Friday, and I was listening to people. A woman came to me in desperate housing needs, in desperate poverty, using food bank, trying to survive, trying to feed her children, trying to keep herself going. And she voted Remain. She wanted to vote Remain, and that's what she did. There are people in this constituency in exactly the same position as her. Desperate, trying to make ends meet, living in insecure private rented accommodation, who want to survive, who voted Leave. Don't let the Tories divide us on how we voted in 2016. Let's come together on what we will do and want to do as a party to end austerity, to invest in the future and in people's lives. The real difference in this country is between a Tory government looking after the richest and a Labour Party and a Labour movement and a Labour government that will actually look after the rest and invest in the future. That's why I put forward the views I have on trade in future with Europe. That's why I put forward these views on protecting manufacturing industry jobs. I'm worried about Nissan, about Ford, about Jaguar Land Rover, and the job losses that are happening or threatening in all of those companies and all of those places. That's why I'm very determined to maintain the trade deals and trade arrangements we've got, and indeed expand them for the future. Because our party represents communities all across the country. And I've just come from the Labour local government conference, as I said, and the way I put it to them was this. The Tories have used local government as the vehicle for carrying out austerity. Most councils have had their budgets cut by about half since 2010. Theresa May told her conference that austerity was over. How many in this room think austerity is over? And you don't spend £15,000 on a dinner. You don't think austerity is over. It's absurd. She's saying this, austerity is over and everything's getting better. Well, if you are dependent on public services, it's not. And you look at the way local services have been run down all over the country. So if your library is under threat, it's only open a short time, or worse, closed altogether, swimming pool under threat, rarely open or closed altogether, playing fields that are either sold off and gone, or rented out so expensive to the private sector because the council's got to make ends meet and therefore not available for the majority of people, then your life chances are being damaged, your sense of community is being damaged, your community is being damaged. Local government is a very important part of our lives and of our community. So I'm pledged, absolutely, that we will, yes, raise taxes, as I've said, but we'll also use that to properly fund local government and the public services that go with it. There's many, many areas that are very important. Take the first one, we're in the school, education. Teachers work incredibly hard, students work incredibly hard, but they're under stress and under pressure. And they're under stress and under pressure because of underfunding in the schools, and I think because of an inspection system through Ofsted and a competitive system between schools that has become so extreme it's actually damaging the stress levels of children and teachers, and I think some big changes have to be made there. I want the legacy of the next Labour government to be the NES, in the same way the NHS was the legacy of the post-war Labour government. The NES stands for National Education Service. The principle that education is a right, not a privilege, not a commodity, it's a right that we all have. That means free nursery places for 2 to 4 year olds for 30 hours a week. It means proper funding of primary schools. It means free school meals for all primary school children eaten together. It means a pupil arts premium. It means restoring the family of education through local education authorities. It means proper funding of colleges. It means parity of esteem, real equality of esteem between university and vocational education, and it means raising taxes in order to end student, college and adult education fees. It is expensive, I fully acknowledge that, but I think we need to catch up with other countries that have already gone down that path. The Scandinavian countries, Germany, many others have gone down that path, and as a result they have a better skilled, better prepared population, they have better standards of education. We are falling behind because our government has taken the choice of tax cuts for the very rich rather than investing in the next generation and the future through education and through decent housing and decent job opportunities. That surely has to be the right way forward. The health problems that this country faces are not the fault of the National Health Service, they're the fault of a government that underfunds the National Health Service. And so the threats of closure of A&E departments all over the country are very serious, and the levels of mental health stress are equally serious. It was a Labour government, so a Labour Party rather, amendment to the Health and Social Care Act in 2012, the only thing in the Health and Social Care Act with which I agree, which was the parity of esteem between physical and mental health. But has it happened? No. There are too many people go through a mental health crisis, present themselves to the GP, and then have to wait 6 months to get therapy. If you've gone through the level of stress that you present yourself at the GP because you're going through stress, That is a big thing personally to do. It's quite difficult to do, to go there and say, I've got stress, I need help, and then told you've got to wait 6 months to see somebody from. In that time, you're probably going to get considerably worse, or you're going to go on to antidepressant drugs, which I'm not saying there isn't a place for them, there is, but the first port of call should always be supportive therapy rather than a medicine approach to it, in my view, first of all. And so it is about funding our NHS properly, and it is about funding our mental health services properly. But some of the crisis in the health service is actually brought about because of the problems of social care. There are, at any one time, now, around 1 million people waiting for and in need of social care. 90 people die every day who are on the social care waiting list. We have a crisis of social care. We have a shortage of care workers who are badly paid for what is an incredibly responsible job, many of them on 0 hours contracts and on minimum wage at the same time. It's an incredibly responsible job. Were my mum and dad alive and they needed social care, obviously, like any other person, you do your best to get it for them, and you would hope that there was a good care worker caring for them. It's an incredibly responsible job, caring for somebody, possibly towards the end of their life. You want those people to be properly paid and not stressed out of having to run between appointment and appointment. You want those people to be able to do the job properly. So we're working with the unions that represent care workers, particularly UNICEF, in order to develop a social care strategy for the future. These things are important, but also expensive. That's what we are determined to achieve. The other area of life is, of course, housing. The level of house building is very low in this country. The level of council house building is also very low in this country. And the increase in the private rented sector has with it massive problems of security, of high rents, of lack of security of tenure, and often inefficient energy, inefficient buildings. And so our strategy is, one, to give local authorities the power to regulate the private rented sector within their communities and to set rent levels in their communities. Secondly, to invest in council house building by allowing local authorities to borrow against the income stream and the asset values they've got, but also through central government support to be able to build more housing with lifetime secure tenancies at a social rent. That is how the post-war Labour government dealt with the housing crisis they faced then, and it's the housing crisis we're dealing with at the present time we deal with. Because I don't want to live in a country where at any one time hundreds of thousands of children are living in insecure accommodation or in hostels. I don't want to live in a country where thousands of people, maybe 10, 15,000, are sleeping rough on the streets, in barns and around this country. There's something morally repugnant about the idea that the 6th richest country in the world should tolerate this level of rough sleeping, which with this government, with universal credit and all the other things that go with it, will only get worse. And so John Healey and I have worked out what we would do if we were in government tomorrow. Day one, set up a programme of buying enough properties to give emergency housing for the rough sleepers. Day 1 plus, working with local government to start the building programme. Day 1 plus plus, regulation of the private rented sector. And so we move through to hopefully really change the levels and quality of housing and the levels of security across the whole country during that first term of a Labour government. A government committed to ensuring there is decent housing all across the country. That surely is something worth doing. Labour governments in the past are those that have done so much to bring about decent rights and security within our society. It was the Labour government in the 1960s that was the first ever to introduce a Race Relations Act in Britain. It was the Labour government in 1970 that introduced the Chronic Sick and Disabled Persons Act, the forerunner of disability discrimination legislation. Very, very important step forward. It was the Labour government that introduced the Human Rights Act in 1998, which enshrined the European Court of Human Rights and the European Convention of Human Rights in British law. It was the Equalities Act, which did so much to further equalities in this country. So don't listen to the Tory press when they tell you the problem is health and safety, the problem is human rights legislation. Human rights legislation is what gives us the right to assembly, the right to know, the right to free speech. These things are important and I think should be taught in our schools as part of mainstream education, what our rights are, and protect those rights, because if we don't, somebody else will take them away from us. Rights only last when people fight to protect those rights. But it's also about the kind of society we develop. The economy that we want, the economic development that we want within our society. In the last election, we put forward our manifesto for the many, not the few. That document was written in 2 weeks, and it is not perfect, I'm not pretending it is, but it was transformative in what it was putting forward. It was totally different to anything that had been seen for a very long time. And I was beyond belief angered and annoyed when somebody phoned me up home. I just got home, I'd been campaigning somewhere. I just walked through my door, sat down at my desk at 12:15 at night, starting leafing through papers, thinking, really, I ought to go to bed because I've got to leave at 6 in the morning. The phone rings. Who wants me now? Somebody's leaked the manifesto. I said, oh my God. Really? Don't know. Of course they don't know, it's a leak. What a stupid question. And then I thought, well, absolutely nothing I can do about it at that stage has been leaked. And it was due to be released the following week. And then it got initially panned by every inspired commentator overnight. Then other people got hold of it in the morning and said, wow, this is good, this is good. And so they built the thing up, saying, really good stuff coming out of the manifesto. So I went to the doorstep when I go into a meeting and said, what do you think about this leak? I said, it's just work in progress. That's not the finished document. The finished document will be even better. Just wait for it. And then we went to launch it at Bradford University. It got an amazing reception for it, because it was saying austerity has to go. The neoliberal economics that bring you to the idea that you cut your way to prosperity has to go. You invest in the future. Hence the proposals for a national investment bank, which will help to fund infrastructure across the country, regional transformation funds that will help with local developments, that will help with housing developments, that will help with local infrastructure developments, and invest in high-tech, new jobs, new industries, and new companies. Because the bedevilment of so many small businesses is they develop a good idea, they take it forward, bring it up to, if it's a manufacturing enterprise, to production level, and can't access the capital to take it any further. A local investment bank, a national investment bank supporting it, would be in a position to support and help those companies and help to ensure they stay here and work with us. These things are very, very important, and that we're determined to do. But you notice I said there's regional investment funds, because one of the problems in Britain is there's a huge imbalance. There's a 6-to-1 ratio between transport investment in London and the South East compared to the North East of Britain. That's unsustainable, it's ridiculous. You need a crossway for the North. You need an investment in regional railways all across the North of Britain. You need better transport links all over. You need a transformation fund for the West Midlands, operating in the West Midlands, decision making by people in the West Midlands, as you do in other parts of the country. And that is exactly what we are utterly determined to achieve. I'm not proposing setting up a new tier of local government. What I'm proposing is to working with local government in order to deliver that, because they are genuinely representative people within those communities. And so that way, we do invest in and empower communities for the future and create those better quality jobs in the future. And I'm absolutely determined that we achieve that. So, we pressurise this government, but it's also about the kind of society we want to live in. If you think about it, since austerity came in 2010, the gap between the richest and the poorest has got bigger. Most people have had no real wage rise for almost 10 years. Public sector workers in particular have been very hard hit, and because of the job losses in the public sector, many of those are effectively doing 2 jobs, often do the jobs of people that have gone because of their determination to deliver services. And so the numbers of people that Theresa May grandly claims are in full employment, the highest rates of employment ever, I meet many of these people. They are literally doing 2 or 3 jobs, unfortunately, on 0 hours contracts. I was talking to somebody in Worcester 2 days ago who was telling me about his life. December, he's on 0 hours contract, he did pretty well. There was a lot of demands for work in December, and he was able to get quite a lot of work. He did all right December. He's had nothing since January, nothing since the beginning of the year, no income at all. The benefit system doesn't catch up with him. He then goes into debt in order to survive. The stress on this particular person is absolutely huge. That is because we have a universal credit system that doesn't work, that puts people into debt as they migrate onto universal credit, and for the majority, not all, but the majority of people end up worse off on universal credit, with many families up to £50 a week worse off as a result of going onto universal credit. That is what this system does. And so, we hold the rollout of universal credit, we bring in a system that is genuine social security, that doesn't force people to food banks and to payday loan companies in order to get through to the time when they'll eventually get a payment from the DWP. And talking to those who work in the DWP, they are very upset and very angry with the system as well. They do not like or want to deliver it. So it is up to us to bring about that real level of security within our society. That's what we're about. That's what the Labour Party was founded to achieve. So when we campaign and go on doors, knocking on doors to ask people to vote for our candidates for the council elections, we do it to get Labour councillors elected. We do it to get Labour councillors whose priority would be housing, good quality planning, environmental sustainability, supporting our children in their schools. But we also do it as a massive stepping stone towards getting a general election and getting a Labour government elected that will deliver for the whole country. That is what I'm absolutely determined to achieve. So when we take the challenges of the world, the refugee crisis that's in so many parts of the world, we take the environmental challenge that's there in the world, we will operate from a basis of justice, of peace, of democracy, and of humanity. We won't be hand-holding with Donald Trump. We'll be supporting the Paris Climate Change Accord because I want my children, my grandchildren, and their children to live on this planet. That means we have to take action for this generation. The challenges are there. Our party, 500,000 and more members, active in all parts of the country, is the one, I think, that can develop those policies. That's why we have a process of developing our policies, the details of it, on national education systems, on social care, on housing, and so much more, where the expertise and knowledge of our members is there. And I campaign in all our marginal constituencies. I go to them all the time. And we're now developing community organising events where we have a series of roundtables in a big hall like this, and we ask each table to discuss their questions, discuss their issues, discuss their proposals. And all of those are then fed into a policy-making process. And most of the events I go to, often the majority of people at those events are not party members. They're people that come along because they want to be part of what we're trying to do and what we're trying to develop. The mainstream media might be attacking us and might even say unkind things about me from time to time. There is a different world out there. There's other ways to communicate. Remember the last days, the last general election, we were talking to each other about politics on the bus, on the train, in the club, in the cafe, talking to each other about the kind of world they could live in. Young people talking about the kind of world they wanted to live in. A generation for the first time hearing from a political party, you're not going to be worse off than your parents' generation, we're going to redistribute wealth so you're better off than your parents' generation. It's offering hope in society, and that surely has to be what it's about. And we can use social media to get that message out. And if you say that it doesn't work, I'll tell you this. One simple thing I sent out last week got 2.9 million views in 6 hours on social media. You can get a message out to an awful lot of people in a way that in past generations never could. So we have all those possibilities ahead. So, we've got council elections coming up here. Elect this man and the team. Win control of the council, because that's a very good step forward, and that will lead us in a good place within the general election. All these marginal constituencies across the West Midlands, one's got to win. The road to a Labour government lies in the West Midlands, lies in the East Midlands, lies in Scotland and those South Coast marginal cities that we've got to get. And it lies in our party and our communities being united. The alternative, what are the far right offer? Divide people, blame minorities, use racist stereotypes and language to divide us. the end of their process of abusing and dividing people, they've achieved nothing. They haven't built a school, haven't built a hospital, haven't trained a teacher, haven't trained a doctor, achieved nothing but discord and division in society. Our party, however, does represent hundreds of thousands of people and the aspirations of millions. So when we go door knocking, when we talk to people, it's that hope and that vision that we're absolutely determined to deliver. My job is to go around the country doing my best to encourage people to do that work. I hope you will give your all to the campaign here to win control of the council. And give your all to get a general election and a Labour government. Thank you very much.